My name is Chethan Ramachandran. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Playnomics. The title of this talk was quite long, something about the power of unleashing adaptive marketing and predictive analytics. For the purpose of slides, I collapsed that to predictive marketing. I think that sort of sums it up. So first, let me tell you just a little bit about who we are at Playnomics, and then I'll dive right into what predictive marketing is. We've been around since 2009. We have offices here in San Francisco and offices in New York. As the introduction intimated, our belief is that data and prediction can unlock the true power of free-to-play, and in many ways reinvent the free-to-play model. And I'll walk through what we think about that. Just a little bit more about our company. We've got great venture backers, one of whom is in the audience here. So if you guys are looking for money, it's that guy in the gray Playnomics sweatshirt at the aisle right there. And we've seen a lot of data in the last 4 years. We've seen a lot of data across social, across mobile, and we think we have some insight in what makes free-to-play games tick and what can actually make them monetize better. So at this point, we've seen, I think, actually over 150 million player profiles. 30 million plus of those are active on a monthly basis. Hundreds, if not thousands of games at this point. So we've seen a lot. But let me start with the conclusion. What's the point of predictive marketing? Well, this is, I think, the point. The point is that it can do wonders for the overall marketing and monetization of your game. I'll walk you guys through this later on, but I always like to get to the conclusion before I even start, because I think this is fundamentally what everybody needs. If we want a healthy game ecosystem with great developers making great games and giving the player audience the games they deserve, developers need to make money sustainably. And we want to help them do that in a sustainable, scalable way. All right, I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This is sort of the thing everybody knows. It's tough. It's actually really tough to have sustainable game development where you're putting out games that you want to create for an audience and actually keeping that audience. Well, first of all, it's hard to get that audience. It's crowded, all these channels out there. You're targeting on all sorts of stuff which may or may not make any sense in your game. And you do all this hard work to acquire a user and they leave after the first day. Some of the research we've done across some of the games we've seen, it's a range of 60 to 85% of people drop off after the first day of play. So imagine all the time and effort you spent on trying to get a player into your game. Now they've left. And now you're left with a few people who you're trying to get to monetize, which, as we know, is also hard because you have to nurture them over time and finally get them to open their wallet. And once they do, it's great. But to compound the issue, this is actually real data that we've seen. We looked at players who started in the first 2 weeks of Q1 of this year, and we tracked them over the quarter. And we said, OK, what is actually the blended monetization rate across a representative sample of games that we feel is representative of the games industry? So I think we hear in the industry kind of a 2-3% monetization rate on average. We actually found something a little more grim, I would say. In the games that we've selected for the sample across all the players we saw who joined in those first 2 weeks, 0.77% spent money. If you look even further, and I wish I had a punchy little graphic for this, so you just unfortunately have to read some dense text there, but I'll try to walk you guys through it. If you look even further, the top 1% of spenders basically accounted for 32% of all the spend. So this is very much a stratified society between those who have and those who have not. And if you were to expand that to the top 20%, 90% of the spend came from 20% of the people. So my math is not really that good. 20% of 0.77%, it's really 0.15% or so that are making 90% of the revenue in the game. It's not that many people. So why does this happen? I think one of the reasons it happens is what I was talking about earlier with acquisition. Most game developers must have one of these money trees growing in their backyard because the spend on acquisition without real targeting, without real insight into who you're targeting and why they're coming to your game, it's been quite high over the last 3-4 years. If you do have a money tree, my wife would like to know about it, I would like to know about it, please see me after the session. But for those of you who don't have a money tree, spending for installs without a notion of player value is suicidal. And I think everybody would agree, looking at these numbers, that that is the accepted, common way that people are doing things in the industry today. Number 2, why does this happen? Well, actually, you might be surprised. I'm actually not a big fan of analytics. We built a system using predictive analytics, but we never actually thought that that's where the value is. We look at analytics and we're like, wow, lots and lots of data points and lines, and if I were to look at this, I'd say, okay, well, more people played once, then less people played twice, and then even less 3, and then 4. Okay, good. So I've spent a week understanding that. Those people have probably left, by the way, because after the first day, they're gone. What am I going to do with this? So we actually have a very grim view of the usage of information without an action. And I think, again, when I think about the idea of predictive marketing, one thing I want you to take away with is you've got to do something. Data is wonderful. Analysis is wonderful, but you've got to do something. The final overarching theme, I think, is that, and our data scientist Brendan's in the back there, and we were talking about this right before the Brendan, raise your hand over there. There you are. Raise your hand high, Brendan. Come on, there it is. We were talking about how people spend so much time optimizing user acquisition to try to find people to get into their game. And then once they're inside, it's just sort of like, well, okay, they're there. I'm going to just do whatever I normally do for everybody so that everybody sees the same thing. So what you get is this sort of one-size-fits-all marketing where promotions happen with no intelligence, essentially to everybody, with no differentiation. And so if you have 100 people and you're promoting, gold, but only one person cares about gold, you're not going to have very effective promotion. And in fact, you're going to really upset the rest of the people in the game because you've now promoted something that they could care less about. But we believe, fundamentally, that all these players are actually people. There's actually human beings on the other end of the game with real hopes and dreams, motivations, and actually, most interestingly, different types of value. So someone can be a spender very, very quickly and then never spend again. That's different value than someone who builds gradually over time. And it's very different value than someone who never spends but brings 100 people into the game who then in turn spend a lot. So we are really focused on understanding the concept of player value and unlocking it because we think that is actually the key. If you can unlock it, then you can do something about it. We'll get there in one second. Value also has other dimensions in terms of people's personality. So what we do is we try to look at things in terms of psychographics as well. Why is someone in the game? What are they there for? And then we also look at it in terms of someone's incentives. What do they react to? Do they care about gifts? Do they care about viral invitations? Generally, our thesis, I hope, is a human thesis that people are different and therefore should be treated somewhat differently. So I'll give you a quick example. This is one of the first things we did in 2009. This is a social game from a great group of people called Large Animal Games in New York. Some of you might know Wade and the folks over there. This is actually a billiards-based game. So all you're doing is you're taking that little thing in the center there, you're putting your mouse over it, you're dragging it, and knocking those objects around. It's pretty simple. But not when you look at actual activity. Not when you look at what's happening behind the scenes and how people are interacting. So with that really, really, really simple game, we started clustering people's activity, and we found 3 distinct groups of behavior. We found a blue group, which looks huge. Lots and lots of people. Lots and lots of people. But if you look at the second view, that blue group actually collapses to that tiny little speck in the corner on the XY axis. So the left view is number of buddies versus number of credits, and then the right view is number of times played weekly, and those guys are playing not at all. It actually makes a lot of sense because this was done back when Facebook was letting people spam their, letting games spam their users' friends. So what you ended up happening was a whole group of people who actually could care less about the game, but were just in there once or twice or maybe weekly because their friends kind of told them to be in there, but had zero value to the developer. We found a green group, which was highly, highly competitive. And if you look at the right view over there, those guys actually don't play that often on a weekly basis, but when they do, they play to win. They actually preferred to play only with other competitors, and none of their friends wanted to play with them, because why would you want to play with someone who wanted to beat you in oblivion every time? Okay. And then we found what we think was the honeypot for this game, which is this red group, sort of all-around collectors. These guys had a decent amount of friends, a decent amount of activity, and they weren't very good at the game if you look at View 2, but man, did they keep coming back for more and more and more and more, and every new object and every new item that came out, they wanted to get it. Okay. So then we said, let's test this, and let's actually do something and target people based on what we think their incentives are to see what the outcome is. So we said, competitors, you really annoying folk who just want to beat other people, here is a tournament that you have to spend virtual goods on to get into. So spend money to get into a tournament to beat other people. Would you do it? Well, if you're a competitor, yeah, actually you would. The left's blue group is competitors versus a control group of the average population. And I mean, we're talking like a 10x response rate increase, a 10x increase in activity. It was unbelievable. But again, was it really that unbelievable? Or was it just purely common sense that people are different, and if you isolate what makes everybody different and what motivates different people to do different things, you can then extract the value you need from them in order to have a sustainable game and an enjoyable game. I think that's the other thing that gets brushed over when people think about data and analytics and quantitative marketing. You can definitely grind your audience into submission. But that's a road to nowhere. What you want to do is you want to talk to people on the basis that they want to be talked to. And that is a road to success. So, what ultimately is the idea of predictive marketing? It's pretty simple. It's marketing 101. It's the right message for the right person at the right time. For the game industry, the free-to-play game industry as it stands right now, it's two things. Those folks that are valuable, nurture them. And those folks that you've paid for that are not spending any money, find a way to extract dollars from them, because otherwise you will not have a sustainable, profitable game. How do you extract dollars from people who are not spending money? It is probably through third-party ads. But I think that can be done intelligently as well. And we'll talk about that in 1 second. Going back to this idea of predictive marketing, the right message for the right person at the right time, when you start to unpack it, it's actually not as easy as you would think, because if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. So what is the right person? Well, this depends quite a bit on the type of game you have and the type of mechanics you have. And here we just show a few ways that people can look at their game audience by timeline entry funnel, how engaged they are, where they are in the world, their status as a monetizer, the milestones they've reached, and then predictions about what they're going to become. Pretty hard. But I would argue that some notion of this is valuable, even at the most basic level. Segmenting your audience around some parameters that are meaningful to you as a game developer is important. By the way, these can also be personality-based. If you want to talk to Brendan a little bit more afterwards, he'll talk for hours at end about these algorithms that he's created around finding personality in games. We've actually come up with a player typology around people's appetite for being social versus competitive versus doing things that they're used to versus trying new things. We really think that there's an amazing amount of knowledge to be gained about someone as they play, and we're trying to isolate it ultimately to make sure that games find the right audience. But this is equally as valid as where someone is in their game in terms of how many levels they've completed. You'd want to know how competitive someone is. Because if you can get that same kind of reaction for a competitive stimulus, those people will stick around forever. Right person, that's hard. The right message is actually not as obvious either. And we sort of think about it as, at every moment, you want to be thinking about the right object to put in front of your player. Sometimes that object is nothing. Sometimes you may want to put nothing in front of the player to let them keep playing. But maybe at the end of the level, you want to offer them a power-up. Maybe you want to give them a tip and trick at how to get through the level. Mapping that to the types of segments you want to talk to through certain channels is also difficult. But again, very little incremental work goes a really, really, really long way. What type of channels am I talking about? I mean, broad distribution of games means you can talk to them anywhere. In-game, you can talk to them out of game. Retargeting is pervasive on the web. And actually, when done right, quite effective. Push notifications, emails. All of these are channels that should be weapons for you as a developer to keep your game players engaged. And then finally, right time. This is also, if not the hardest part, one of the hardest things. You figured out who you want to talk to. You figured out how you want to talk to them. Now you got to do it quickly. As we said, people are leaving every day. How do you make sure you hit them in real time before they leave so you can actually maximize their value? And so timing can be based on all sorts of different parameters. It can be based on where you are in the funnel. It can be based on your milestones. Again, it maps very nicely to this idea of segments, meaning if you think about your game in terms of how player groups go through them and kind of figure out where everybody's branching, you can then come up with a really nice marketing strategy to start talking to them in a really effective way. All right, so I'm not going to spend too much time on the pure commercial, just a commercial that doesn't sound like a commercial. We make it easy. We spent 3.5 years trying to figure out how to automate this so it is as easy as dragging and dropping a campaign from one side of the screen to the other to make it live. Literally. We have a booth on this floor, I think in the bronze, silver area. Come check us out. We'll show you a demo. But within the system, we have spent time on what we think is the core, which is the ability with millions and millions of people to quickly predict on an individual player level who is going to be valuable, why, and what will unlock that value. What goes into that? A lot of data mining, a lot of prediction, lookalike modeling. If you want your ears to be talked to for 3 hours, Brendan has a lot of content. We have spent time taking technology from bioinformatics, information security, general finance, and applying all those techniques to games because games have the best context. And this is actually where it can be the most effective for both the player and for the developer. And again, I want to stress that this is actually a tool to make your players happier. And if they are happier and more content and are more satisfied, they will stay in your game longer. All right, so let me just walk through very quickly how we at Playnomics kind of structure right person, right time, right message. We score every single player in a game across multiple dimensions continuously. This means that as someone joins and starts spending and become really loyal, they become bucketed with a high loyalty score, a high monetization score, and now, wait a second, their monetization's dropping off, but they're still loyal. Now they're in a group that is loyal but not monetized. It allows you to, in real time, continuously track to where your players are. By the way, everything I'm going to show you, up until a target button, is free. Go use it. Tell us that we're wrong, that this is not the right way to do things, because we are fairly certain that this is how you have to run a free-to-play game with millions of players, each with their own value. The power of those scores, again, is the ability then to group people into really flexible, dynamic, small or large segments. This group that you see here is called highly engaged. That means that in our parlance, they have a high overall engagement score, which in turn breaks down into a loyalty score, an intensity score, an attention score. But the nice thing is that this is not a fixed type of segment that you have to live with. We've built an engine that has almost infinite capacity to segment an audience. So you can do it based on who's active today, who's newly engaged, which are people we predict will become your best players. They're just not there yet. You can do it based on dolphins, whales, recent dolphins, high monetizers, absolutely. And you can do it based on geo, engagement, loyalty. And the best thing is you can combine each of these together to get customized for your game. So we think that's important, that every game has customized segments that matter for each game, because ultimately every game is different. Even though you may share mechanics with some other games or a skin type with other games, ultimately games are fundamentally different, as are the people playing them. The right message. We spent a lot of time on this as well. First, we wanted to build a way for people to actually, on the fly, quickly build effective campaigns. So literally all you do is you select one of these segments, you take one of those creatives on the left there, which is a Super Mario Brothers creative, just because we like it. We call it Social Mario Brothers. We drag it over to the right, and then for that segment, the creative is live automatically for just those people. What does that mean? That means that you're not bothering your monetizers with an ad to spend for the first time. You may be bothering your monetizers with many, many discounts over and over again, but at least you know they've spent. The other thing we've done in terms of the right message is we've actually started building playbooks. These are marketing campaigns for every type of game genre and every type of game mechanic. So say you have a social slots game. We know at day 14 generally what your non-monetized population is, and we know what you should put in front of us. These playbooks are not built into our product yet. We just offer them for you to use. But over time, we'll just bake it in so that depending on the type of genre of game you have and the mechanic of game you have, you'll have customized marketing that will work for where your game should be. And then you can tweak, 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 tweak. We can even do the exact same thing with behavioral push notifications. We actually think this is just a cool feature. All these crazy segments. And as I play iOS games, I get just random push notifications from the games I'm playing. This cannot stand. Therefore, we added push notifications. You can even do customized sounds for different segments if your monetizers want to hear something interesting. But the key is you want to do it over and over again and adapt it. This is actually the only place where I'll say analytics makes a lot of sense. It's the ability to iterate over and over again. So this is where you want to look at those squiggly lines. Because what you're going to do next is you're actually going to press target again and do it again and again and again. What does it mean ultimately to the player at exactly the right time? Your first day 7 players, message them with a tip or a trick or a power-up. You will not believe the efficacy you would see from putting a tip or a trick in front of somebody in their first 3 to 7 days. You may assume they know how to use the game, but guess what? That creative says, did you know that the ice fists kill all the blue monsters? Pretty easy, but highly effective. I mentioned earlier that you can talk to people outside your game. There's a lot of apps out there. It's very effective to talk to people out on the web. Once they've downloaded your game, remind them and bring them back. Actually, through our system, you can do all of this all at once. Loyal players who are highly engaged, reward them to continue to have their engagement. Obviously, monetizers, nurture them. Here's a special weapon power-up for you. It may be free or it may be paid. Our philosophy is to let you guys decide what to put in front of your players. But we do have, as I said, recommendations and suggestions. And we're getting to the point now where we can do it very, very fine-grained for almost any type of game and mechanic. I think this is the part of the most interesting thing is that, if it's 2% monetization or 0.77% monetization or 8% monetization, that's still a 90% plus non-monetized population that's sitting in your game. So I think it is going to become, if not already, the norm to try to effectively show ads to those people. And I think the point is you want to show it to the right person at the right time. So you don't want to show ads to a monetizer who's spending money, or someone who's predicted to spend money, or someone who's just spent money. You wanted to do it to people who you know are not spending money. But if you're going to do it, you should be very effective and targeted. And let's think about just advertising in general. I think we'll all agree that if there is an ad that speaks to us, we will be more willing to listen to it and hear it than a non-targeted ad. So what we're also doing at Playnomics is on the ad side, really thinking about how you can tie in-game activity to what advertisers are going to put in front of a player. And advertisers all are looking for ways to talk to people at a very unique level. So I would argue that Nike would want to talk to people who are very competitive if they could surface that. And we think we can do that, and I think that will unlock, in many ways, spend in games on the advertiser side that is much more meaningful. Right now, CPMs are okay, kind of untargeted, but we believe that we can drive it to be meaningful so that both in-app purchases and advertising are a real possibility for game developers all the time. And again, it's not one or the other, it's player dependent. Every player has different values, so you can show them different things, or you should show them different things. All right, I'm going to get to the end again. Where we started is now where we'll end. A case study on increasing early spend. We were asked to first isolate and predict people who would spend money in a game in the first 3 to 7 days. And number two, we were asked to predict what it would be to unlock that spend. So we actually did something very simple. We found a control group of spenders, or early spenders that we thought would spend money. We broke it up into 3 groups. One was the natural early spenders. The other 2 we targeted with 50,000 free chips and 100,000 free chips. And you can see what happened. So what did happen? Well, the amazing thing is this campaign actually lasted for 5 days. Right there, where that dotted line is. But what it did was it unlocked spend from the people we predicted that would spend in an amazing way. Look at that red line. That red group saw the campaign some point during the campaign time and just escalated. This is actually misleading in an interesting way in that the normal spend in this game was about $10 per player. The $40 control group are the ones we predicted would be early spenders, and the $120, $106 ones are the ones that we unlocked with effective targeting. Side note, the ones who ultimately spent most money actually were shown 50,000 free chips, not 100,000 free chips. Culturally, where we ran this experiment, too much of a good thing seemed like a scam, actually. All right. That's basically the heart of predictive marketing. What I did want to tell people about, since I do have a stage for a few more minutes, is about a new product feature that we're going to be launching over the next 2 weeks. It's free. We are baking a prediction of churn into our product so that all of those segments you saw will now have an associated percentage of the probability that that segment is leaving. So really, it's the percentage of that segment that is about to leave. We think that's cool. We think it's helpful to have you then realize who to talk to and who is the most important. I would argue it's the ones that you've spent all that time and money getting into your game that you don't want to leave. We're going to help you isolate those. And again, this is free. Where I think this becomes really powerful is where the idea of someone leaving actually equates to the dollars that are at risk at your game. And that's the second thing that we'll be rolling out. Revenue at risk that ties to the people that are predicted to leave your game. Because ultimately, again, all this data really ultimately has to come down to one thing. It has to lead to a simple action that has results that you feel good about. So we're trying to give you as much effective information to push that button and to keep pushing it over and over again, because we know then that you'll have really good results retaining and monetizing the right people in your game. Behind the predictive stuff, Brendan's crazy algorithms. I'll take it down really quickly so Brendan can spend his time talking about them. I wouldn't want to spoil your thunder, Brendan. So, what is the conclusion here? Free-to-play games in this part of the world, on social and mobile, let's call it year 4 or 5. The same monetization rates have been stable for all that time. Acquisition is top of mind for everybody, but doing it in a way that doesn't lead to value in your game is suicidal. It hasn't worked, and neither has looking at all these endless charts. You have to get value out of each player continuously. You're operating a real-time service with real-time game mechanics, and in real time, you have to be extracting satisfaction or giving satisfaction to each and every player. And each and every player have their own unique value. We do not believe it can be done manually effectively. Of course, I'm biased because this is the company that I started to automate this stuff for the industry. Take it for what you will. But we believe that it has to be done continuously and automatically. And if it's done continuously and automatically, it will reinvent the free-to-play model. Because now you're talking about not just 2% that you're earning from everyone in a very, very meaningful way that actually creates player satisfaction, which I would argue is ultimately what this industry should be about. That's it. Thank you very much. I'll be around for questions afterwards. I think we have limited time, so.
Yeah, we're out of time for your particular session, but it sounds like you've already set up your colleague to be mobbed.
That guy.
Which he's going to have. He's going to be exposing the crystal ball, I imagine. Thank you, Chethan, for your presentation.
Appreciate it.